Well, hello, that's me again. Today is October 23. It is Sunday, and this is off the cuff, on the run, so to speak, video, but I had to do it, and there are reasons for that. As you already know, the Russian Defense Ministry, which means Kremlin pretty much, already informed about this. Let's take a look at some headlines and for example, this is how it was presented yesterday by the RIA, which is a Russian Information Agency. It's official information agency of Russian Federation, and when they post something, most of the time, 99% of the time, it is very well verified and weighted information. And this is what it is. Yesterday they broke the news, which of course now are all over the media environment or space. And as here I will read you the direct translation, as some very reputable and trusted sources in different countries informed, including those sources in Ukraine, that the Kiev regime is getting ready on the territory of its own country the provocation connected to the explosion of the so-called dirty bomb or even low-yield nuclear munition. If you would go and look at a full article in Russian, in RIA website, you will see yourself that actually the country is pointed out immediately. It is United Kingdom, British. I absolutely can't believe that, because I won't put past them to, I mean, yeah, if need be, they will, go and basically create or come up with the nuclear provocation. And that explains a little bit the situation with Mr. Ben Wallace, Minister of Defense of United Kingdom, flying urgently to Washington, D.C. It was a couple days before Liz Truss kind of succumbed to the lettuce. And that's why they needed to talk in all those, super duper protected room, and probably he was talking to Mr. Austin. After which the conversation, Mr. Austin called Mr. Shoigu. But here are the English language headlines about that, and look at this. So already Mr. Shoigu spoke to Minister of the Defense of France. And here is how it all reads. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Sergei Shoigu and Sebastien Lecornu spoke by phone on Sunday discussing the situation in Ukraine, which is consistently veering towards further uncontrolled escalation. Shoigu, in an apparent reference to previous media reports, voiced concerns about a possible Ukrainian provocation which could involve the use of a dirty bomb. There's an interesting point when you talk about in the reference, when Shoigu references media reports, that shows you how the journalists everywhere think so much about themselves. They are nobodies, they are merely tools, and the information which RIA News posted was, of course, information about and from the sources in top high-level Russian government sources, and they merely just articulated it, just posted it. So, but yet they still think that Shoigu references media reports. No, Shoigu references intel information, which he has the right to disclose when pointing out that some nefarious stuff is happening, and that it will involve nuclear elements or the whole nuclear bomb. And immediately after that, we can find this interesting development, because on the Twitter of the UK Defense Ministry, you can see yourself. This is what they presented today. At the request of the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Secretary of State for Defense spoke with his Russian counterpart Sergei Shoigu this afternoon. And look at this in the bullets, which are basically the printout, so to speak, of whatever was available in terms of non-secret, so to speak, parts of this conversation. The defense secretary refuted the claims and cautioned that such allegations should not be used as a pretext for greater escalation. He is talking, of course, about that Sergei Shoigu alleged that the Western countries are preparing the nuclear provocation in Ukraine. The defense secretary also reiterated UK and wider international support for Ukraine and desire to de-escalate this conflict. Well, obviously this is where you begin to laugh, because UK cannot de-escalate shit, basically, because basically everything UK does is basically provoking something and working for the larger globalist purpose, and this is the way they are. This is the clockwork, so to speak, mechanism, if you wish, in UK. They just cannot do things, they're just not normal people there. And but this is a very interesting development, and the reason it is so interesting, not only because how, and when you look also at the background of the 101st Division, in reality, I believe it's 1st or 2nd Brigade Combat Team, which has been basically deployed in Romania. It's 4,700 paratroopers, which is light infantry, which is not a contender for anything, and it cannot fight the modern war. But and I'm talking about the modern war with the peer, or better than peer. But the fact is, when you look at this, you can see actually, and you can kind of get a whiff of a desperation which is happening right now for both Kiev regime and, of course, for the West. And especially, do not forget, tick-tock, tick-tock, we have, guys, November midterms. We already received our ballots. Guess from 3 times who we will be voting for. Rather, not going to be voting for. And here's the situation, obviously. So the situation is desperate. And if you look attentively at this whole kind of stream of the events and the logic of those events unfolding, you can see yourself that something is afoot, and there is a desperation on the United States part. And that also explains why Austin called Shoigu. And I'm pretty sure that even if you can read this readout on the Twitter from UK Defense Ministry, where they point out that both sides did it professionally, polite, and most courteous manner, speaking to each other. I think so. That's the same way that Shoigu communicated with Austin, and probably Gerasimov spoke to Milley. I don't remember, but it was relatively recently. So basically, but the point was made, and now we know that Shoigu called ministers of defense of Turkey. Obviously, Russia called Ankara, Russia called Paris, Russia called, obviously, London. And now we know that Shoigu spoke to Austin yesterday or 2 days ago, I think. So, as you can see yourself, the point has been made. And this brings us to the situation, to the, so to speak, tactics, if you wish, or sit rep, or on the ground, with the whole situation of Kherson, and this expected, much talked about attacks or offensive of armed forces of Ukraine on Kherson direction, so to speak, or towards Kherson. And everybody knows that Russians are evacuating people of Kherson. They're basically not only Kherson Oblast or region, but also the city of Kherson, which is a 370,000 or something like that size city, very substantial one. Many people started, as usual, which is absolutely normal, especially for the Western media, but also for hysterical bullshitters in Russia, especially after Mr. Surovikin, the General Surovikin, spoke about difficult decision. They started to speculate that, oh my God, Russians are about to abandon Kherson. Let me put it this way, again, and this has to be stressed. What Surovikin was talking about, nobody knows. But what we know for sure, if Kakhovka dam is basically exploded or broken or destroyed, if you wish, and you have Dnipro River, basically doing running down the downstream and basically flooding everything there is, obviously it's not only going to flood very large parts of Kherson city itself, it also makes it very difficult and undefensible for a fairly short period of time, because in this case and Russian army will have to produce new bridges, the pontoon bridges, which Russian army has all means of doing this and providing the kind of bridges and supply lines very fast. But for 1, 2, 3 days maybe, Kherson becomes sort of indefensible. But if you look attentively at what is happening around Kherson, anything but evacuation and abandoning of Kherson is happening in terms of military. That is why we're always laughing at the fact that when people begin to speculate that, oh my God, they announced the military regime or military in command of the city, that means something is bad. No, it's not bad per se. It's just the fact that yes, indeed, Russian army, Russian ground forces there, and the command decided that now the city runs completely under military authority, and this is done all for the sake of the defense of the city. And that's what we have. But when you look attentively and you follow this tactical minutia, you will see yourself that despite the fact that armed forces of Ukraine accumulate fairly large forces around Nikolaev, in Nikolaev, around Nikolaev, and around the basically Kherson area, you will see yourself that primarily this offensive, so to speak, is not in force. It's basically either company or at the most battalion tactical groups trying to break here and there. They get annihilated or thrown out, and it continues now for days. And guess what happens? They go in, sustain, again, horrific losses. You can find many videos of that, verified videos, and still no big-time assault. We can only speculate on what is going there, and you know me, I hate speculations, but something tells me that about this 300,000 mobilization troops, and judging by the almost, fever pitch activity on the part of the combined West, they expect something which is not really necessarily directly Kherson related. Even if to consider the fact that those people in Kiev will basically come to the conclusion that they need completely destroy Kakhovka dam and flood all those large areas, which puts immediately, and it is a known number, which puts immediately at least 50,000 people in danger of being flooded, and we can only guess how many civilian victims there will be. And that is why Russians remove as many civilians as they can right now to the left shore of Dnieper River. And that is where we have to the, so to speak, interpretation of Mr. Surovikin when he stated that the difficult decisions have to be made. There are many speculations now that he meant abandoning of Kherson. I don't think so. You do not enforce or fortify the city you are about to abandon. If anything else, it looks like Russia is not going to abandon it, and even if it would, I mean, it wouldn't change much in terms of the situation on the whole theater of operations. But I don't think so. It's in the plans. And I can only convey to you the opinion of the man whom I actually, one of very few people, professionals in Russia, who can speak openly and whom I respect tremendously on his assessments. And I actually quote him in my books. And among few officers former officers of Russia where I know that when they speak substance. And Mr. Lyankov, the colonel of Russian Air Force and a major, as I already stated, contributor of the very reputable and extremely professional Arsenal of Motherland magazine, He spoke to the Russian channel. It's kind of, utility channel, very famous, live.ru, and he spoke that he says, I disagree with both versions of interpretation of Mr. Surovikin's words when he said either we have to abandon it or something else going to happen, getting ready for the some kind of the provocation, including nuclear or dirty bomb provocation in Kherson area. He thinks that when Surovikin was speaking about the difficult decisions, he was talking about basically striking and annihilating the military political top of this is basically what is implied in Lyankov's words, military political top of Ukraine, including those people for the as he said, not decision making but decision executing centers, and that means, yeah, we know if SBU building of the SBU security service of Ukraine have been already targeted in Kiev, this time those Kinzhals and calibers can fly into the places where there are all those American, British, and other NATO generals and colonels and all those CIA and MI6 operatives sit. Russia knows where they are. And if this will be decision made, so that's what the difficult decision means. But of course, yeah, annihilating military political top of Ukraine automatically means that there will be nobody to sign any kind of the capitulation act or whatever the political arrangement. That will be a difficult decision. That will also mean that Russia has to really proceed and basically occupy, well, pretty much most of Ukraine. The thing which Russians don't really want to do, honestly, but who knows, again. So we'll see about that, but I just needed to convey to you the words of one of the few people whom I respect, and I'm talking about media people, those military specialists who are operational, so to speak, in the public media sphere, and Mr. Lyankov certainly is one of those. And that's what we have at our hands right now. And it is good that Mr. Shoigu made a very specific point about this whole situation with the dirty bomb or even low-yield nuclear device. And that's good. And in this case, we just know that he won't speak about it based on the news reports, but based on the intel. And Russian intel, unlike the American intel in Iraq, and its weapons of mass destruction, is not in the business of bullshitting and doing a PR. And that is why you seldom see anybody from Russian intel community going out there and making statements, grandiose statements about some bullshit which down the road turns out to be bullshit. So, and this is what we needed to talk about today specifically. But, so we need to also remember that this is not the only thing which is happening. And again, as I repeat non-stop, keep an eye on the bigger prize, so to speak. And now, if we go back a little bit, few days ago, and to the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of China, and I make a very specific statement about myself. I'm no sinologist. I do not understand China in any political or ideological sense. I do not pretend to. I don't even know many Chinese words. In fact, there's probably none. So, and when I say this, I convey my basically interpretation and my military, political, and geopolitical gut feelings about what is happening. And do not forget, United States right now is literally in the split after this 20th Congress of Chinese Communist Party, because Comrade Xi and his people now fully occupy the military political top, including financial top in China. And guess what? That means the removal, which is ongoing as we speak, and already started in the Congress with the removal of Mr. Hu Jintao, especially in the most humiliating manner. We can see immediately that the purge of the so-called Komsomolцы, the Youth League of China, which was the most pro-American, pro-Western faction, is ongoing. And of course, that means that Chinese rhetoric, even regarding Taiwan, has changed. And we know that let's take a look what has been stated. Mr. Gilday, who is, of course, Chief of Naval Operation, he's an admiral. Look what Newsweek reports about this whole situation with China. And here it is. Speaking at an event hosted by the Atlantic Council on Wednesday, U.S. Naval Operations Chief Admiral Michael Gilday discussed his forces' preparation for a potential conflict erupting in the Taiwan Strait, where Chinese President Xi Jinping has long vowed to reunite the mainland with the self-ruling island over which Beijing claims sovereignty. So Mr. Gilday obviously he has to do what he has to do, explaining this to all those, so to speak, brainiacs, who are, most of them are clowns, in all those Atlantic Council and whatever, former spooks, former semi-literate, generals, who basically operate only for the PR and, produce this idea that America is still somehow America of Roosevelt immediately after World War II, which it is not even close. But hey, he needs to state that, yes, we are getting ready, and if China decides that, to attack Taiwan, to capture it, that, the U.S. Navy will be ready. It is a whole specific topic onto itself, which requires a very long elaboration about what the U.S. Navy can do there, but I think so not much in terms of the outcome. It certainly can damage the Chinese Navy, but the losses of the U.S. Navy will also be catastrophic there. So, in this particular case, we can only state that it was there that on the 20th Congress that Mr. C, Comrade C, stated that actually, there is a contingency where we have to do it by force, in terms of Taiwan. And the United States, as you know, they are all those strategic documents, which are laughable most of the time when they are created in Washington. They speak about the fact that China is even bigger threat than Russia to the United States. In some sense it is, because China's economy dwarfs whatever the economy is in the United States. And that certainly doesn't sit well with the United States, even considering the fact that the US completely subordinated Europe to itself and is going to milk it until Europe is no more. But now you suddenly have the situation in Ukraine and Europe, and you have the situation unfolding, and there's a lot of talk back and forth around Taiwan. Again, United States doesn't have forces, it simply absolutely doesn't have them, to fight a single war with the enemy such as Russia. It just doesn't have the resources to do it. Yeah, it can announce draft, can probably draft around 1 million people. Russia, meanwhile, will draft another 2.5 if it comes down to it, and that will be easy, even despite some bumps which Russia encountered. Thank you, Mr. Serdyukov, and your reforms, quote unquote, with this partial mobilization. But other than that, what the United States will be fighting with in Europe? Of course it cannot, so that is why the Russians just view this 101st combat brigade combat team deployment to Romania is a joke, and maybe some attempts to to do the tripwire force. But if we look at China, that's all resources United States have. They need to throw there to fight China. And obviously the United States cannot do two things simultaneously, but that's what is happening right now. And the United States is getting onto this split, and unlike the, Jean-Claude Van Damme, who did his famous split commercial with the two trucks, United States cannot do splits. And as I already stated, it cannot fight even a single war with the peer. Fighting two wars with the two peers, really, guys, this is not even serious. And this is this is the strategic situation the United States faces, and hence it kind of explains you a little bit all this chaotic and hysterical and fever pitch hysterical statements, movements, and those probably threats, real threats, which Russia had to react to through Mr. Shoigu. And to kind of give you also a little bit of sense to how, well, I made a mistake last one of the former videos of mine a few videos ago, that I stated that Associated Press was the British one, which wouldn't make any difference in terms of the assessment of this media resource. It is American resource, but Reuters is certainly British one. And guess what, how those guys are caring about Ukrainian people. Now they say, and caring being the, I'm being sarcastic of course, how water has been weaponized in Ukraine, and they say that Mr. Putin actually, that's the basically the headline. If you look at the larger picture, the home page of Yahoo News, they call about how Mr. Putin weaponized the water. No, Mr. Putin didn't weaponize the water, neither did Russia in terms of Ukraine, because obviously those low lies from Reuters have to recall what Donbass and its people and Crimean people experienced for so many years, being denied water, being shelled constantly, and being denied electricity. So they evidently had no problems not reporting on those situations in Ukraine, because, well, the Reuters, as it is the case with the most of the Western journalism, they are low lies. Not all, but most of them are, and they will report whatever the big boss will tell them. So they are now crying me a river, and they cry everybody a river, that the Putin weaponizes the war. No, Putin doesn't weaponize the war. Russia weaponizes, so to speak, the infrastructure which is crucial for the defense of Ukraine, or rather offense of Ukraine, and that will continue. And the attacks and explosions and demolition of the infrastructure which is directly involved into the basically Ukrainian war against Russian population in the east will continue. Absolutely. Do I have sympathy to people there? Yes, I do, of course. I mean, it's nothing good, you know. You don't want to civilians suffer. But before West claims any kind of double standard, high ground, moral ground, which it doesn't have, it didn't have it for a while now. So about the fate of civilians, they should look up the Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yugoslavia, and I can go on and on and on, and we have to constantly remember at this stage, Russia doesn't fight Ukraine. Russia fight combined West in Ukraine, and in fact, Ukraine armed forces, or whatever is left of them, these are NATO forces, both figuratively and literally, with armed forces of Ukraine being run, command and control, and actually having huge contingents of all kinds of those foreign fighters are NATO forces. And in this particular case, Ukraine is indeed, I have to agree, de facto is a NATO country. Well, too bad, it will be destroyed. And this is what I wanted to tell you about on this Sunday. It's kind of off the cuff, but I needed to cover this topic because it is extremely important. Or as they say, you have been warned. So guys, in this case, have a nice rest of your weekend. And those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please, support me on the Patreon. And I really appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.